There's one spot left in the NBA's conference finals. Who will grab it? The Rockets or the Supersonics? Game 7 from Seattle coming up.
The Sonics can play like champs on one day and get whipped the next day. We'll examine the ups and downs of George Karl's club.
And we'll preview the battle of the heavyweights in the Eastern Final. It's set for tomorrow, the Knicks and the Bulls.
Next on Showtime.
This is NBA Showtime with your host, Bob Costas.
And this is the Seattle Coliseum side of the first Game 7 of this playoff season. The Rockets and the Supersonics soon to do battle, with the winner headed to the Western Conference Finals and a date with the Phoenix Suns. Hi, everybody. Bob Costas along with Quinn Buckner. Oddly color coordinated, despite the fact that there was no consultation this morning before heading over to the studio. You played in 4 Game 7s between the Bucks and the Celtics in your career as an NBA player. What are your thoughts?
The most important thing you have to do in any game, particularly Game 7s, is manage your emotion. There's a tendency to get too high, and once you get too high, you're not able to concentrate. So the emotions are going to really be important to be managed today.
Okay, there have been 12 series so far in these playoffs. The only one in which the home team has won every game to this point is the Houston-Seattle series. Seattle, therefore, has to be considered the favorite today simply by virtue of having home court advantage. In fact, none of the 6 games to this point have even been close so far. But if not for some unusual occurrences the final weekend of the regular season, it could have been Houston hosting today's Game 7. The Rockets had a 1-game lead with 2 games to play when the lowly Dallas Mavericks came to town. But the Mavs pulled the shocker at the Summit in Houston. And then the next day, the final day of the season, Seattle could have clinched home court over Houston with a win at Golden State, but Tim Hardaway went wild for the Warriors, hitting for 41 points, and the Sonics lost by 10. So the Rockets had yet another chance in San Antonio later that night. Houston led by 2 with time running out. Dale Ellis takes the shot. David Robinson puts in the follow, but the replays showed it shouldn't have counted. The clock had already reached triple zeros. Rudy Tomjanovich pleading his case, but the basket counted, and the Spurs went on to win in overtime, and Seattle wound up with the home court advantage in this round of the playoffs. How important is that advantage? Well, the home team has now won 13 straight Game 7s as we go back in playoff history. In fact, the last time that a road team broke through and won the 7th game in any round of the playoffs, you have to go back to the spring of 1982. That was when the Celtics-76ers rivalry was at its hottest, and the Celtics were down 3-1. They won the 5th game at home. They won the 6th game at the Spectrum. They came back to Boston Garden for the 7th game. You may remember that. The fans dressed up as ghosts. They walked behind Billy Cunningham and Dr. J on the 76er bench trying to haunt them, and somehow, with Andrew Toney having a huge game, the Sixers pulled themselves together and won on the road in that 7th game at Boston Garden to take the Eastern Conference Championship and go on and face the Lakers for the title. Now, to turn our attentions to the Sonics and the Rockets, we head to Seattle and we join Dick Enberg. Dick?
All right, Bob, indeed, for Houston, it'll take some advanced rocketry for them to break recent history, and even this series thus far, home court has been so dominating, a 29-point swing. If you're playing in Houston, the Rockets average a 14-point victory. Here in Seattle, 15 points, the average of the 3 Sonics wins at home. And why is that, Steve Snapper Jones, that the home court seems so strong here?
Well, Dick, you know, you've got the anxiety and the pressure of the 7th game, the fact that your season could end if you lose, and what the 6th man does, give you something to hang on to, and they give the home team that energy to play through any tough moments, and what they want to create is pandemonium and confusion for the visitors, and so far, home cooking. It's awful good.
And Seattle coach George Karl says, I'll play off the crowd, keep my game plan simple.
Slash, steal, hit, run, play. Nothing complicated, simple. Let's play our game. Our game's been defending people and running and playing free and flow.
but the road team can win, and Irvin Magic Johnson has some personal experience winning here in Seattle. How can the Rockets upset the Sonics today?
Well, the Rockets going to have to get good outside shooting, and that means Maxwell and Smith. Now, in Game 5, they combined for 18 points here in Seattle. But in Game 6, they combined for 45 points. Plus, the Houston Rockets team made 8 three-point shots. So, three-point is the key for Houston Rockets.
So keep your eye on that long-distance line. Houston coach Rudy Tomjanovich will.
Daily bread or something. That's the Houston Rockets. Because we have the strong inside guys, we have to rely on the spacing to keep people off of them. And when they go in, we're tough to beat.
In talking with both teams, they've complained about being tired. This has been a long-distance relationship. With more on that, here's Dan Hicks.
It sure has, Dick. Not only is this the longest series of the playoffs so far, the first one to go to 7 games, it also represents the farthest playoff distance between two cities still in the playoffs, Seattle and Houston, and especially Houston's journey has been arduous at best. They had to stop in Salt Lake City in their first 2 trips here, had to refuel there. That added mileage and time to the local mile process. You can see as the miles add up, almost 10,000 miles between these two teams. A round-trip ticket to Tokyo is less mileage than the 10,000 miles that these two teams have racked up in this series. And ironically, it was Seattle and Houston which began their season in Tokyo last year. So it has come around the world, halfway around the world, to this Game 7. We'll see what happens today. Let's send it back across the coast now to Bob Costas.
Thank you, Ferdinand Magellan. The winner of today's game gets the Phoenix Suns in the Western Conference Finals beginning Monday night at America West Arena. That's where Charles Barkley joins us live. Now, usually, this is a futile question put to almost anybody else, but in your case, we might actually get an answer. Who do you prefer, Rockets or Sonics?
Well, Bob, I think they both cause problems for us. Seattle is the deepest team in the league, and Houston's got that monster in the middle. So it really doesn't matter. They both cause different problems.
You were 2-2 against Houston this year, although one of the losses you were out with a sore shoulder. 3-2 against Seattle. Who do you think is playing better at this stage?
It's been a very weird series. Every game has been a blowout, and I don't think I've ever seen a series like this before where the home team blew the other team out every game. But I think today is going to be a nail-biter. I think it's going to be a real close game today.
Charles, your team is new in terms of its playoff experience as a unit. You lose the first 2 games against the Lakers, you come back and win, and then you go and win in San Antonio. Now, is the team have the right attitude now to go for the championship?
I think so, Q. I think that the Lakers series really made us grow up a lot and mature. We had to grow up a lot in like a weekend period. When we lost the first 2 games at home, it really made us, I think, just mature a lot. And I think we've really played well the last 4 or 5 games. San Antonio played well last weekend, but we played well the last 2 games. And I think we're ready, and we feel very confident.
You've had the bad left hamstring. How does it feel right now, and has the rest been important for you?
Well, I think the rest is good. I think that's why we wanted to wrap the San Antonio series up so we could rest until Monday. The doctors have done a tremendous job, but I feel better than I have at any point in the playoffs so far.
Speaking of wrapping up the San Antonio series, I don't know if you have a monitor there to be able to see it, but we're going to roll in the last play when you hit the jumper against David Robinson. Tell us what you were thinking as this play developed.
Well, Bob, I knew David was backing up. I knew he wasn't going to let me get to the basket. So what I wanted to do was get around the free throw line area and just make a good shot, because normally I'd rather go to the basket, but he was backing up so fast I knew that I could not go to the basket. So I said, well, just get a good jump shot. Worst thing happen is overtime.
Are you personally in a different playoff head now? Or are you still out playing golf? Is it the same approach to the game, or is it different in the playoffs?
Bob, it was weird because when the playoffs started, I quit playing golf. I was like so intense and I wasn't relaxed. And then I started telling myself, wait a minute, we've won 62 games, and I've been playing golf all season, and I should just get back to relaxing. I think I came out a little tight in the playoffs, so I've been back on my regular schedule the last week, and I think I played a lot better. There's no reason for me to get uptight. I just got to go out and play basketball. Yeah, and I'm back to playing golf.
Suppose you and the Bulls meet in the finals. Will you and Jordan go out during the afternoon and play 18 or 36 together?
Well, that depends on NBC. If y'all make us play early, we'll go play out later in the afternoon. Just depends on the TV schedule.
Well, I believe we'll put you on in prime time unless there's a third Cheers retrospective. I believe we've cleared the time away.
If you put us on prime time, we'll definitely play.
All right, got to turn away from Charles Barkley, but only briefly. We'll be talking to him again soon. Coming up, we turn our attentions back to the Seattle Supersonics. For a team that won 55 games in the regular season and is now on the verge of the conference finals, they've certainly had their share of troubles, and Peter Vesey jumps into it with both feet right after these messages. Season. On Tuesday night in Game 5, he went for 19, and the Sonics won by 25. But in Game 6, it was a different story. Didn't have a single field goal, scored just 1 point, and the Sonics were trounced. Now, Seattle's opponent today, the Rockets, is obviously a formidable foe, but perhaps the Sonics' toughest opponent this season has been themselves. Peter Vesey reports on a team with a world of talent, but a team still groping to put all that talent together.
Don't break out! Don't break! Dad! Get the ball in!
The thing that's crazy about our situation with this team is we do have a lot of anger and frustration, and this year it's been very, confrontational at times.
Hey! Get it, Michael! Now back! Help it!
The tempers flared a little bit in the locker room, and I thought it was things was needed to be said that wasn't being said, from the players nor the coaching staff.
Transition, fist out, play intense, serious. The beginning, Michael.
We're a young ball club, and I think we're just trying to get on top. And when you're trying to get on top, I think sometimes you go through obstacles and go through problems, and we're just trying to solve those.
In the mind of George Karl, there are no problems. He likes the way things are in Seattle. The Sonics are the only team left in the playoffs without a true superstar. No Jordans or Barkley here. No center on the level of Akeem or Ewing. And you won't find a traditional point guard. You will find players, multi-dimensional athletes who assault opponents in wave after wave.
It's a family feud, don't get me wrong. I mean, tomorrow night we'll have 2 or 3 probably fights. And that's the way it's been. I mean, because of the depth of our team, it seems like happiness couldn't go through the whole team. It seems like the 6, 7 guys that played well were happy. The 1 or 2 guys that got screwed out of minutes weren't. And, okay, that's maybe not the way it should be scripted, but that's the way it is.
Unfortunately, the script has often read like a melodrama. With 3 weeks left in the regular season and the team in a tailspin, Karl did something unheard of. He benched 2 starters, Sean Kemp, the team's best player, and Derek McKee.
On April 1, I wanted to go into training camp for the playoffs, and my team didn't want to get there. They wanted to rest on their laurels. And Derek and Sean weren't the only people that did that.
Was it warranted?
Well, when it happened, the thing that me and George talked about was that it wasn't going to be for very long, and I knew that, and it was just a matter of him trying something different, and went back to normal.
Was it warranted?
I don't know if it was warranted. I think what he did, he got a message across to me that he wanted to simplify the game a little bit, and I tried my best to do that at the end of the year.
Earlier in this series, we saw just how explosive the mix in Seattle can be. Karl and Gary Payton in a heated exchange that stemmed from what Payton saw as a lack of playing time.
Generally, you can say, "Hey, Gary, you got to understand, we're in the playoffs. You don't get pissed off about minutes." but they do. And I like players who want to play. I want players who, that anger is okay in my locker room.
Me and him, we were like that. That's what happened. It just happened. I mean, the next day, you don't see me going yelling back at him, and we got a beef, because we don't.
You can dislike the coach as long as you play for him. If Gary and George have their arguments, fine. Have your argument, then I'm going to take Gary to the side and say this, and that, and let's go. The bottom line is to win. And that's what George wants to do. That's what you want to do, Gary. That's what I want to do.
The ultimate bottom line is this. Despite whatever friction may exist on this team, or maybe because of it, the Sonics are just 1 game away from the Western Conference Finals. What better testament to these players, or to this coach?
And I've been on teams, I've been in locker rooms when the loser, you can almost see his face. He's in your locker room. It's over. The season's over. And you can see it on teams. And the good thing about Seattle is I don't think he's in our locker room. The most devastating times in coaching is when he's in your locker room. And there's nothing, you're dead. It's just when you're going to die.
What a comment.
He's some coach. He's also a walking soundbite. But you know, he says that about anger, right? He feels that if he can express his anger in the locker room to these players or on the bench, then they should be able to express their anger to him, and anything else would not be healthy. He also told me that he apologized to Peyton publicly for shoving him the other day, and that Peyton then apologized to him for yelling at him.
All right, now, Quinn, you're just a few months away from being a rookie coach. How does that philosophy strike you? Any give and take you want, boys, and we'll work it out internally.
And within reason. I think the most important thing that you've got to have here is the communication. There's no doubt about that. But I think what you have to do, you have to take that anger out on the court. I don't think you can redirect it back at the coach, because all he's trying to do is keep you in some kind of structure. I've got a little problem with that kind of direction, but if you put it toward the court, that I can live with.
Just one other thing. Peyton always says, though, that if he's a quiet player, he's just not the right player. He's not a good player. Eddie Johnson says that about him all the time. He wants him to go off. He wants him talking trash to his teammates, to the coach, to everybody. Otherwise, he's not effective.
By the way, Peter, we appreciate your attempt to relax the dress code, but if you take it to the next level, no shirt, no shoes, no service. We'll take a break right now. When we come back, we'll get Bill Walton's take on the Sonics, and we'll also hear from Bulls coach Phil Jackson on the tactics of their next opponent, the Knicks. We're back after these messages. And the Rockets, the winner, of course, gets the Phoenix Suns in the Western Conference Finals. We welcome Bill Walton into the mix, and we start with him. What do you think, Game 7?
Seattle wins this game, not because they're the better team, but because they have the home court and the failures of the Houston Rockets. Hakeem Olajuwon, who's been carrying his team throughout, is exhausted. He's playing with a very painful hip injury, and the Rockets are not supporting him. They're not spacing themselves properly, and Hakeem is not going to the hoop quickly enough. When the double team comes from those big Seattle guards, they're able to not only play Hakeem, but get out on Smith and Maxwell and make them shoot poorly. Seattle, though, is banking on Gary Payton having a big game. He and Kenny Smith have alternated big games in this series, both playing well at home. Also, look for Eddie Johnson to come out. This is the type of game he plays really well in. He has not played well, though, since he hit that 55-foot shot in Game 2.
And I disagree as to why they don't win the game. I think they win the game because Seattle is deeper. And one of the advantages they have in not having a real superstar is that they can come off with 3 or 4 guys that can come and beat you. Houston doesn't have that same luxury. Their bench is not nearly as solid as I think Seattle's, and that's why I think Seattle is a better team.
Rocket official told me after Game 6 that they have a definite chance to win in Game 7 as long as they don't have to substitute. I mean, Michael Jordan talks about his supporting cast, and the Rockets talk about Hakeem's supporting cast-offs. I mean, you've got Matt Bullard and Scott Brooks and Carl Herrera. I mean, they're hurting.
Can either one of these teams beat the Suns in the next round?
Phoenix is sitting very pretty right now. They're going to sit home at the arena and watch this game, and then they're going to go out and practice right after that. Phoenix, they don't really care who they play because Seattle gives them problems with KJ, Houston gives them problems with Barkley down low, but they feel that with their versatility, Barkley and KJ, 2 attackers, they can get either one. Plus, Phoenix is looking at the problems that this Seattle Rocket series is going to cause in terms of fatigue, injuries, and lack of preparation. The travel for Seattle and Houston has been brutal.
And it's a quick turnaround because Game 1, no matter who wins today, obviously is Monday night in Phoenix, and the Suns will be rested. But which of these 2 teams do you think has the better chance? Clearly Phoenix is favored against either. Which has the better chance?
Well, I'm looking at Phoenix. I mean, I don't know how you count it any other way. I don't care who they play.
No chance.
Phoenix is someone's going to win.
I think Houston has a better chance.
I like Seattle because they do have the deeper team, and I think it's been pretty well established that the way to at least stay with the Suns is to be taller than them. Seattle is always taller than the Suns when they play against them. George Karl told me that he was very upset, though, during the first round to watch that they discovered Oliver Miller. He said, we had to go out and make a trade for Sam Perkins to get our player. They found their player on the bench. He wasn't happy about that.
All right, well, the Eastern Conference Final between the Bulls and the Knicks gets underway tomorrow. The Knicks, with that physical style, extended the Bulls to 7 in last year's conference semifinals. That was a surprise at the time. This year, the matchup has been anticipated all season long. Phil Jackson has been outspoken about what he considers the roughhouse tactics of Pat Riley's team. Take a look.
As a former player, there's a certain kind of ethic code that you had. You know, remember when you went to the playground, you didn't submarine somebody? if you knocked them down, you picked them up kind of thing. There's a certain hardness that you have to play in this game with. We're professionals, and we know that. You don't always help the guy up, but you don't put people's careers in jeopardy.
A valid distinction.
There's absolutely no question about it. I mean, I played, Bill's played. You do not take a guy out to injuring here, but you do not let people come in the paint without them knowing what's at stake here, without them knowing that they've got to pay the price.
All right, well, have the Knicks crossed that line unduly?
I don't think so. Since the Phoenix fiasco and the new league rules against violence, I think the Knicks have been playing very good basketball. Phil Jackson is trying to goad the Knicks into focusing on the physical play. The Knicks don't need to do that. They're good enough to win this series by themselves if they stick with Pat Riley's game plan, which is pressure defense and get the ball to Ewing and get him good shots. Spot-up shots created by penetration, championship style, and when Ewing gets that ball in the low post and he's going to the hoop, you have to go to the basket. No time for fading away at the championship level.
Does it matter how this series is officiated?
Oh, it certainly does, but the league has already laid out the guidelines. It's going to be very, very hotly, it's going to be very well defined. I mean, they're going to not let anything go in the beginning. They're going to play it very close to the vest. But let me just say that Phil Jackson had a lot of things to say about Pat Riley's coaching. We're going to hear more about that on Showtime tomorrow. But he was talking about, in that piece, was the way Pat Riley coaches teams. But he did say that it really doesn't apply that much this year. He felt that he did it a lot more last year.
So obviously he didn't approve of what Riley did last year. He's critical of him.
Very critical of him. He also had a lot of complimentary things to say about Pat Riley. But as far as the way he coaches players to possibly hurt players, he's totally against that.
Right, but I don't believe that Pat Riley coaches players to hurt people. See, I think what has really happened here is Pat has told the guys basically what I said earlier, to not let people come to the basket unobstructed, and I think the players have carried it too far. What's happened since then is both the league, Pat Riley, and the New York Knicks have taken all of this and tried to get it back in perspective, and I think they've done a good job with it.
Okay, obviously we'll talk more about this series tomorrow. We'll get all three of you to pick it before it starts, but coming up, it's Game 7 between the Sonics and the Rockets. We'll send it out to Dick Enberg, Magic Johnson, and Steve Snapper Jones for the call right after these messages from your local station, and we'll see you at halftime.